This is where we're getting our feet wet, working with editing audio tracks that we have taken now for our podcast. Now, this is a very entry-level course. Later on, you may want to look into the other courses available that are a little more detailed in terms of some specifics you can do with editing. But we want to just lay the foundation here in this course, giving you just enough knowledge to be able to create your own podcast. If you want to take it further, you can. A lot of times this knowledge is going to be self-explanatory. In other areas, it's going to be a little more difficult. So what I've done is prepared a couple of instructional type screen captures to walk you through probably two of the most common. But let's start out first by talking about different devices. Android devices and iOS devices. Transferring the files from your phone, these are tracks that you've recorded on your tablet even as well, and taking those now and transferring those to a computer. So the tools that you need to edit is a computer. You have to edit with a computer, or there's another way around this we'll be talking about in the next unit, which is an app dedicated specifically for working with sound and patching together sound audio tracks in order to form a completed podcast. That's an Anchor, called the Anchor app. But in this specific unit, we need to touch base on other options that we have out there using a computer. So editing sound with a computer. So we have to talk about transferring those files from your phone or your tablet and getting those into the right position to edit on a computer. Now, the most obvious way, you can share the file with yourself, so that means you can email that file to you. In both iOS devices and Android tablets, phones, there's an option after you create a sound file or an audio file to share that. Now, you could share that with yourself by, like I said, emailing it to yourself as the file attached to the email. There's other options out there too. There's, of course, with Google and your Google account, if you have a Google account, most of us do, you have the option of uploading it to your Google Drive and then accessing that across all of your devices. Another option is Dropbox. That's a pretty popular tool right now for sharing files across devices. You can also choose to go ahead and just do it the old-fashioned way and do a physical link up with a USB drive from your device to your computer, and then pull the files off of your device that way. So there's tons of different options on obtaining and retrieving files into the computer to edit with. My preferred way of doing it is sharing it to myself right after I create the file. Now, you want to be sure, though, as you're doing this, label your files correctly, and be sure, and when you send that to yourself, you know exactly what it is you've got and where you're going to save that out to, so you can use it in your editing process. Now, the first software we're going to be looking at is called Audacity. Audacity has been around for a very, very long time. This software has went through a lot of changes in terms of updates and patches, but it still, from what I can tell, looks the same as it has since it first came out. So let's go ahead now and consider a few of the options and the basic workings of Audacity. Now, first you have, of course, your core component buttons. There's pause, play, stop. This is your back button. This is your forward button. And the big red button, of course, is record. Now, importing files is one option, but I know as soon as I mentioned the record button, many of you probably thought, well, why do I need to record from my phone when I can record inside of the Audacity app? So let's go ahead and just pretend we're starting from new, and we will record, even though the sound quality, as I've said, is your internal microphone unless you have a USB mic plugged up, and that some cases is kind of difficult, but we really want you to record from your phone or tablet, but you can. And I give you a couple of options here, can show you how to edit inside of this with files that you create recording in Audacity. So we're going to go ahead and record. Your track will show up below here within these audio track areas. So see, I closed out one, so that was one. So when I go and actually to open up a new track or record from scratch, they will show up in order in this area below. Now, I go import from file, and I import audio. From here, I can select files that I've saved out. So I have some already made. This is King 1 MP3. I'm going to open it up. Now, this is something that I've recorded. There you see all the sound waves. These are decibels that have been recorded in real time. So you see there's an area there that you can hear at the beginning when I loop this. One more time. So the area at the beginning of that looks like there's no sound there. But
Martin Luther King said,
even though you can't hear anything, at the beginning and end of this small recording, there's sound.
Martin Luther King said,
It may be so minuscule and small that it's not picking up in terms of seeing it on the wavelengths, but they're there. I'm going to import another file. Now you can see how these two show up. I've labeled one King 1 and King 2. This is the second. So you can see these overlap. And when they overlap, we
Martin Luther King said,
have to fix that, right? So how we do that is pretty simple.
Martin Luther King
Okay,
said,
up here are some more tools that you have in Audacity. This tool allows you to move things. This is a tool that allows you to see the different wavelengths in terms of pitches and sounds within your sound waves. This particular tool lets you move particular tracks around. So see now, moving the bottom track correctly where it be positioned so that the sentence makes sense. Now I'm going to get my selection tool. This selection tool is the small, looks like a paragraph, and I'm highlighting by holding in and scrolling and hitting delete. This area back here, you have your playback speed here that can allow you to listen to it at different speeds. But if we look real close, though, we can see how the different wavelengths work. They almost look like an EKG reading or a heart monitor reading. And it's really peculiarly looking, but you can see how this works. So there is sound, though, even though we don't see it. So when you record a track and you go in and you open it up, even though it looks like there's nothing there, the safe option is to get rid of it. If there's nothing there to begin with, get rid of the areas where there's dead sound, even though you think it wouldn't matter. So you can see how this kind of looks when we zoom in. Now there's still an area there in between these two recordings. And here's the back part of this one. Go ahead and get rid of that one too. But that area in between now we have to fix. I'm going to delete this section just by highlighting with my highlight tool. You have to be careful which tool you have selected. You'll go and to move something around and notice it's not working. Now you can see the tracks are labeled. That's what I mean by clearly identifying what track you're working on. King 1 and King 2. These levels allow you to turn the sound up and down inside of your working inside the editing process. So when you go and you use the highlight, your selection tool can do various things. You can copy, paste certain only particular. Here, you can see how that works. So I highlighted only that section. That section's going to play. If I were to highlight a larger area, it would play the entire area. So now, positioning my marker.
I have a dream.
It should make sense. So you can see how that works. Position
Martin
your
Luther King said, I have
marker.
a dream.
Wherever your marker's position, it's going to play from that specific area.
Luther King said, I have a dream.
So if you were to see certain tiny little segments in between even words, that's how close you can zoom in and look at specifics here. You can cut that out so that sentences flow better. You have any dead spots in between?
Martin Luther King
Get rid of
said,
it.
I have a dream. King said, I have a dream. Martin King said, I have a dream.
So
Martin Luther
now
King
we've
said,
joined
I
these
have
two
a dream.
together. They're not joined in terms of there being one complete track, but these two tracks are together now. And you can play around with different settings. Just remember, though, your project rate should be 44,100. And when you go to import audio, you'll see that it's able to import different files, MP3s, waves. Now, I imported a transition now. This is some music that I created in GarageBand. Zoom in, you can see there's a lot going on inside of that as compared to the voice.
Martin
So,
Luther King said,
there's a lot of music. So when I include this now, you can see there's 3 tracks involved. Now I want to edit that down some. So I'm going to select a certain area of this. Let's say the beginning that I want to work with. If you go to Effect, you're able to do a lot of different types of effects in here, such as echo. There's reverb. You can play around with these to get different types of effects with your transitions. You're able to also use a compressor. But if I want the sound, if the transition, the music is louder than my voice, you can go into these settings and play around to see that there's an easier way to do this, but this is one option that you have. Selecting these will actually allow you to highlight only portions of the music you've created. You can actually repeat this so that it dubs over and over. You can copy this. There's the repeat. You can copy this selection. You can cut the selected area.
Martin Luther King said,
You can also go in and actually put a delay in, which would allow the transition to come in at a lighter pitch at the beginning and then get gradually louder. And once the selected area is selected, such as this, it'll stop at the end of that selection. I won't go any further. Now, over here is where you can play with the sound. You can pull the gain down some and pan it down too. So you can see it's considerably lower now.
I have a dream.
Then again, without the selected area, this will go on and on. So I'm going to stop it. I'm going to go ahead and place my marker again. Make sure the transition is where I want it.
I have a dream.
If it sounds okay, if that's where you want it, that's fine. You can go ahead and select the area you want to cut out and get rid of it. Now, if you want to get rid of all of this particular area, you can zoom out. And you see you have that entire back end of this transition you don't need.
I have a
You
dream.
highlight it again, hit delete, and that's gone. So there's 3 tracks involved here so far. King 1, King 2, and then the podcast transition music. All 3 of these together will give you one sound, of course. So when your podcast may have 10 or 20 of these, may have only 6, 2, 3, I don't know. But just remember, playing around by moving the sound tracks around one another. So here we're going to have the opening. The music comes in. So if I were continuing on with this podcast, you'd see how the music would have an intro. You have a cut bar. You could pull a selected piece. You could cut it and copy. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to actually copy a portion of this music, the transition.
Said, I have a dream.
Use our selection tool. Highlight the area you want to copy. You have to click the copy button from up in your toolbar. Move your cursor where you need it, then of course hit the paste. So you need to tighten it up. You can move it in some. This should give you the effect now. You can even move these across tracks. So if you want to move it up to another track altogether, you can. That's options that you have, and you can do this with any track that you have. You can move these selected portions around. And there's tons of different effects you can give. There's tons of different types of transitional effects you can give your music, your sound. So you could really, really play around with these settings. Now, let's say you have it where you want it. You have a nice intro. You want to save the project out. Now, something you need to be aware of with Audacity. When you save Audacity, there's 2 ways to save. You save it as an Audacity project, which I'm doing now, or you can save it as a final audio file. Now, the cool thing about it is you could save this out as a completed audio file, start a new Audacity project, open it up, and it would be one track then. So now if you export it, be sure to go to export instead of save as, go to export. You have a lot of different options. Now remember early on we said MP3 is the most common. One downside with Audacity, and this is a great tool for Windows users, but one downside is in order to save out with MP3 files, you will have to go in and actually download a separate program. So when you go to hit save, you see that it tells you that this is mixed. Now here's you can actually go in and type in additional information. So the artist name, track, title, album. So now you can see it actually needs the lame file. Now you can go ahead and download a copy of this and save out as MP3s. It's no problem. If you want to do that, you can click straight from this save location and download. And that lame file will actually allow you to save out as MP3s then. So, right now I do not have the lame file downloaded, but this is the option you have. So I can, though, go in and export it as a WAV file. Now, WAV files, of course, are larger audio files. They have more information, so they're larger, but they are absolutely usable in other programs that you may open this up in, even GarageBand, other types of stuff. You may use Anchor, including Anchor. We'll talk about that in the next unit. So let's pretend this is a completed podcast. And I want to go ahead and save this out now as a completed file. And I'll just go ahead and save it as a WAV file, because I want all these tracks, the King 1, King 2, and the podcast transition music, to be compressed into one audio track. So that's what I'm looking to see. So I may go in and save it out all together as a WAV file. And then what we can also do, just to make sure that it worked, we can close out this Audacity project and open it up to see. So King Final is what we can title this as. And as you can see, our podcast then would be ready to go on an RSS feed, which is something we'll learn about a little bit further on down the road, or to be uploaded and submitted to the Holler. So sharing your tracks, we covered that a little bit in Section 1, at the end of Section 1. Beginning of Section 2, we ask you to share a couple of files with us, just any recording. So I open this back up now just to see. I want to see all the files have been compressed, and they have. So now you see King Final is all the 3 tracks we just played. And these have been compressed into one. And this is how editing works. Now there's a ton more, steps involved with this. It's not so simple, but this is the basics of editing with Audacity. And Audacity is a really fun program to play around with when it comes to the effects. So I highly suggest you going in, opening up the various effects, seeing what they do, seeing how they interact with one another. You can duplicate different tracks when you import them, and you can see kind of how these things work. So it's really interesting how this works. All right, so let's try editing now with another option. So let's take a look at GarageBand. GarageBand is mostly known for its ability to create music by adding different tracks, just what we have with audio tracks, but these can be different instruments, software instruments that you could pull in and create all kinds of really interesting things. I wish I could tell you that I'm really great and awesome at GarageBand. It's not the truth at all. I'd be lying to you. To be honest with you, I can do very little with it, but I can do enough to create intros, outros, transitions. I can do that, and that's something that we're going to use, and pretty much all you really need GarageBand for when it comes to the podcast course. Let's go ahead and now take a look at how GarageBand works on a basic level. So I go to New Project. I'm going to select Voice. This opens up now. You can see our format. This is our project. And you can see under here we have all kinds of various different types of tracks that are labeled different things. Narration, bright vocal, fuzz vocal, telephone vocal, robot. So what these mean that all of these different options over here, there are preset options. So you could go in and select, let's say, bright vocal. And bright vocal would give you a different effect than dance vocal. All of these controls are your dynamics, your echo, your amp. You can see how these are set as I switch through these on different levels for the different types of tracks, microphones. The area to the right over here, this is your area where your tracks will be laid. Up at the top, you can see where you can actually pin down a playhead. These are playheads, each one of these little tracked areas to the right. You can pin one down to the top. Your workspace is comprised of all the tracks on top of one another. There's no particular reason for what's in order here. These little instruments over here, the different types of gauges and things are not things you need to worry about. This is a cycle button right up here next to the record button, the big round red button, similar to all the apps we've looked at. We have the play button. Beside it, of course, is your stop button. And let's go ahead and pull this out a little bit. Now, wherever your playhead is, here is your playhead. Wherever this is, when you hit play, it's going to play from that point. Something to keep in mind. This is your go to the beginning button, a real helpful tool, trust me, because you can get lost sometimes in all the different areas to the right of your tracks. Of course, fast forward and rewind. Now, whenever I drop this down at the bottom, you can see the controls change. You can have different smart control buttons that pop up, so you can actually play around with those dynamics. If you don't want them there, you can just get rid of them. That's fine too. So let's go ahead now and see how this works. So I'm going to click on a couple of these and record with it. And let's see now. This is a telephone voice. Again, this is the internal mic.
Telephone voice. This is a telephone voice.
And so let's go ahead now and take that and play it over.
Telephone voice. This is a telephone
You can see how the different dynamics affect the sound. And this is definitely not what you want. Now see how the playhead keeps going. So you recorded this track, you hit play.
Hello?
You can record over
telephone
it with your fuzz
voice.
vocal.
This is a telephone voice.
Can I help you?
So if I didn't hit stop,
Huh? Telephone voice. This is a telephone voice.
the playhead would continue. So if I went to hit record again, let's say on a bright vocal, it would record way out to the far right of where you want to start. So let's go back up to telephone vocal now. We're going to get rid of it. I'm actually going to get rid of all of these except for, and I can add in a second and show you how to do that. I'm going to add what I want, a narration vocal. Now you could go to this section here. You create microphone, audio track. You see how the audio track now is pulled up to the left here. Click on voice. Go down to narration vocal. Now you see how that pops up. It changes. This will give us a nice clean
Recording my voice for a podcast.
recording option.
Recording my voice for a podcast.
So this is a little different than Audacity, but same. You still have your sound waves. Wherever your playhead is, you can actually go in, mark that. You can split this. Now this turns this into two different wave files. You can move that anywhere out in this area, or your workspace. When you move it into other areas, such as your robot vocal or your telephone vocal, this actually turns this into the settings of that particular track. So your narration vocal will become, or sounding like
Martin
the robot
Luther
vocal.
King Jr. said,
So we record our tracks. We can move it around in our workspace really easy here. You can see exactly where it is. I can pull this all the way to the front. Hit play.
Martin Luther King Jr. said,
Right, so now let's say that I want to record the second portion of this in the telephone vocal. So go ahead and do that.
I have
Martin
a
Luther
dream.
King Jr. said,
Similar to
I
Audacity.
have Martin Luther King Jr. said,
Play both these over when they're overlapping one another. You get that effect. Now we can set this on a loop.
I
You
have
can listen to this
King
over and over if we
Jr.
wanted to.
said,
This helps whenever you're trying to determine your dynamics. But I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the top track
Martin Luther King Jr.
I'm
said,
going to move it over to the right.
I have a dream.
So you can see now there's a lot of that dead space in between my first audio track and my second. How we get rid of it in GarageBand, you click, split the playhead, and delete. Hit the delete button. Same with your second track, or you can overlap it. That little area right there, overlapping, we can go ahead and split it, select that area, get rid of it. Now you can see how nice this connects.
Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have a dream.
Now, that's really what we're wanting. We're wanting that all these tracks to be connected together in a way that would allow us, when we export it, to have a complete audio file of all those different tracks. Remember I said it's a lot like Frankenstein, right? So a lot of different options inside GarageBand. A lot of these are dealing a lot of times with music and musical type theory, but you don't have to worry about that. Audio works the same though. There is a lot of interesting things you can do with audio inside of GarageBand. Playing around with those different levels, that's a big one. And having that on hand, I mean, that's just a wonderful tool. If you do not have access, let's say, to other types of programs. Now, just to kind of go over a little bit on how to export this, exporting this as its own file, we can do that from here. So let's pretend, if you will, this is a completed podcast. You can add transitions into these different slots to the right, your workspace. So when I export it, I have options similar to Audacity. Of course, you select your location. Dropbox is great for sharing. You can save a lot of times straight to Dropbox from a computer and a tablet and sometimes phone. And let's say I just want to put it in my Creative Cloud, or maybe just on the desktop. I'll put it in Documents. So now from here, I title it. Be sure and title each and every audio track you have so that you know exactly what it is that you're looking at. Sometimes including the date. I'll export this as a WAV file shortly. And I go to my Finder, and I should be able to see it pretty easily. Now, if you wanted to actually go in and create a separate track on here that's actually a music track, you could probably go ahead and create your transition music straight in GarageBand. So there you go. Now those tracks have been combined together, and they're forming this completed track. So that's really the basics that we have. We open up the tracks, merge the tracks together. Before we merge together, cut where we need to cut, insert transitions where we need to insert them. The two biggest programs that we probably could use that I promote anyway, that's probably the easiest and cheapest. If you have an iOS and Apple product, you have GarageBand. If you have a Windows product, you can get access to Audacity. I think, though, we'll probably just work in Audacity across the board moving forward, because that is the software that's easy obtained by both parties, either Apple or Windows. So that's it. That's the beginning of audio editing. And in the next unit, we're going to be showing you how to use a very cool app to do all this fun stuff with, and you don't even have to open up a software program to do it at all. Inside of there are some limitations, but overall, though, if you have access to this app, it's really cool. And the best part, it is free. All right, so thanks so much for taking the course. For The Holler, I'm Christopher Epling, and we'll see you in the next unit, Unit 2, Section 3.